I screamed when my stepmother's hand hit my face. The entire party went silent. In that quiet, I saw him, my grandfather, standing behind the old maple tree, his phone raised and recording. For 20 years, I thought I was just the granddaughter he pitied. Turns out, he was watching. He was preparing for a shift nobody in my family ever saw coming. My name is Carly Grant. The autumn air in Redwood Falls, Wyoming, always had a sharp, clean bite to it, a mix of pine sap and the promise of an early snow. It smelled like my childhood. It also smelled like an obligation. I was standing in a perfectly beige hotel room, the kind that's comfortable but instantly forgettable, when my phone buzzed on the faux granite nightstand. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. That specific vibration, the one I never turned off just in case of a real emergency, was reserved for my father, Greg. I picked it up. The message was exactly what I expected. Tonight is your mother's 50th, just close family. Be here early to help set up. I read the words twice, not your stepmother, just your mother, a title Monica had claimed but never earned, not we'd love to see you, but a summons, and the final, predictable twist of the knife. Be here early to help set up. I am 30 years old. I'm not the family's intern. A familiar tightness bloomed in my chest. It was the old, dull ache of being summoned, not celebrated, of being the designated helper, the built-in, unpaid staff for an event I was never the guest of honor at. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I could say no. I could say I was busy. I could say, Dad, I flew 800 miles to be here. The least you could do is pretend you want my company, not just my labor. Instead, I typed back 2 letters. Okay. It was short. It was non-committal. It was the armor I had learned to wear in that house. My family, the Redwood Falls chapter, thinks they know me. To them, I am Carly Grant, the quiet one, the tech girl who moved to Seattle and got a decent job. They picture me in a small, tidy apartment, maybe with a roommate, diligently working my 9 to 5. They think this beige hotel room is a nice little splurge for my visit. I looked out the window at the parking lot, at the rusted pickups and sensible sedans. My real life was 1,000 miles and a psychological light year away. My real life was a 2-story penthouse apartment in the Harborview Tower. My walls were glass, not beige drywall. I didn't look out onto a parking lot. I looked out over the deep gray blue of Elliott Bay, watching the ferries slide through the water like quiet ghosts. My furniture was minimalist, chosen with intention, and there was a whole lot of empty, silent space. They thought I was a mid-level technician. They had no idea I was the co-founder and, until last year, the chief executive officer of Skyline Haven. We didn't just do tech. We designed and built cutting-edge, sustainable prefab homes. We started in a rented garage with sawdust in our hair and burned through our tiny seed funding in 6 months. We nearly went bankrupt 3 times. I learned to read blueprints, pour concrete, and pitched to venture capitalists who looked at my steel-toed boots like I was a novelty act. And then, we didn't just succeed, we exploded. A year ago, a major construction conglomerate came knocking. They didn't just want our designs. They wanted our entire supply chain and our patents. I sat in a glass-walled boardroom, not unlike my own apartment, and signed a contract that sold my majority stake in the company I had bled for. The number they wired to my private account was north of $60 million. I became a millionaire in complete, deliberate silence. My penthouse is held by a shell corporation. My car, a sleek black electric sedan that most people in Redwood Falls would find offensively quiet, is registered to the same LLC. My family has never been invited to Seattle. They never even asked for the address. My father's text message felt like a tether, pulling me back from the woman I had become into the girl they had decided I was. Be here early to help set up. The memories flooded in, sharp and unwelcome. Christmas at 13. Being asked to watch the neighbor's kids so Monica and Lily could go to the town gala. My high school graduation party, which I ended up grilling burgers for because Monica decided it was too much work for her. Every single Thanksgiving, birthday, and 4th of July, I was the one refilling ice trays, scrubbing pots, or placating a screaming toddler from Lily's side of the family. All the while, Monica, with her loud laugh and perfectly blonde hair, and Lily, her delicate, perpetually praised daughter, would hold court. They were the center of every photograph, the recipients of every toast. I was the reliable, invisible infrastructure that made their spotlight possible. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever been the person everyone relies on, but no one actually sees? I walked over to the small hotel desk, where my laptop was open. The screensaver wasn't a photo, it was a blueprint, a detailed architectural rendering of a massive, modern log home, all sharp angles and towering glass, nestled deep in a forest of pines. It was the dream I'd sketched on a napkin with my grandfather, Arthur Hale, when I was 15, hiding out in his barn. He was my mother's father, the only one who ever looked at me long enough to notice I was drowning. "One day, kid," he'd said, his voice rough as untreated lumber, "you'll build a place so strong, they can't tear it down." I had part of that 60 million had quietly purchased a massive tract of forested land just outside Redwood Falls, land that bordered my grandfather's struggling farm. And on that land, hidden down a private road, was the finished, fully furnished, real-life version of that blueprint. They didn't know about the penthouse in Seattle, and they definitely didn't know I owned the most impressive piece of architecture in the entire county. I looked at the text again. Just close family. I had to laugh at that. In my father's house. Close family didn't mean blood. It didn't mean loyalty. And it sure as hell didn't mean sacrifice. It meant people Monica found useful or impressive. It meant the people who orbited her. I thought of my grandfather. He'd be there tonight, sitting quietly in a corner, watching everyone. I wondered, looking at the blueprint on my screen, if tonight was the night, maybe it was time for Grandpa Arthur to know that I hadn't just built a house, I had built an escape hatch. I made the decision. I was going to the party. But I wasn't going as the girl who used to serve appetizers. I wasn't going as the strong one who could be counted on to clean up the mess. The girl who flew into a beige hotel room to await her summons was gone. I was going as the woman who owned the bank. I was going as the person who had spent a decade building a foundation they couldn't crack. I was going to change the rules of the game. If you've ever been treated as an extra in your own family's story, if you've ever been the last one thanked and the first one asked for a favor, then come with me. You'll want to hear this. Because that night, in the middle of my father's backyard, under the string lights Monica loved so much, the entire set came crashing down, and it all started with a single, resounding slap. I shut my laptop. I grabbed my car keys from the nightstand. From my suitcase, I pulled a small, heavy box, wrapped in simple black velvet. It held something that was going to astonish all of them. Something I had built just for this occasion. I walked out of that beige room, locked the door behind me, and headed for my car. The show was about to start. Driving into Redwood Falls is like driving into a photograph that's been left in the sun. The colors are faded. The edges are soft. But you remember exactly how it felt when it was new. The town is all pine trees and long winters. A collection of sturdy log-style houses that look like they were built to withstand bad news. Our house was one of them. It had a big backyard dominated by an old, sprawling maple tree. That tree was my entire universe before my mother got sick. She and I would sit under it on a blue quilt, and she'd point out the constellations she could see between the leaves, even in the daylight. She'd tell me the maple was the heart of the property, and as long as it was healthy, we were too. She died when I was 9. The house went silent after that. The vibrant colors of her life, the yellow kettle, the bright red gardening boots by the door, the sound of her humming, it all just stopped. My father, Greg, collapsed into himself. He was a man hollowed out by grief, walking through rooms without seeing them, sitting at the dinner table staring at her empty chair. I learned very quickly that I was on my own. I was 9 years old, standing on a kitchen chair to reach the canned soup. I learned to make toast, then eggs, then pasta. I learned how to use the washing machine by reading the manual, how to separate the colors from the whites, because I remembered her telling me. I did my homework at the kitchen table alone, forging her signature, badly, on the permission slips I knew my dad would never see. I became quiet. I became invisible. I thought that was what grief was supposed to look like. And then, almost exactly 1 year later, my father opened the front door, and the silence was shattered. Her name was Monica. She was all blonde hair, bright white teeth, and a laugh that was too loud for our quiet house. She smelled overwhelmingly of gardenias, a thick, sweet scent that bulldozed the lingering, faint smell of my mother's baking spices. She wasn't alone. Hiding behind her coat was her daughter, Lily. Lily was 8 years old. She wore a spotless pink dress, white tights, and shiny black patent leather shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a perfect, high ponytail, tied with a matching pink ribbon. I, in my faded jeans and my mom's old university sweatshirt, stared at this perfect little doll. My first thought, a desperate, childish spark, was a sister. I had always wanted a sister. That hope lasted about 3 hours. Monica swept through the house like a weather system, pointing out improvements. The first change was the rooms. Lily, she declared, was sensitive to the morning light. She was given the large spare bedroom at the end of the hall, the one with the big window and the built-in desk. Monica spent a week painting it, bringing in a new white canopy bed, fluffy rugs, and shelves filled with brand-new dolls. I stayed in my room, the one I had always had, with its mismatched furniture and the wallpaper that was peeling in the corner. Nothing of mine was changed. Nothing was added. No one seemed to notice it was even there. The New World Order was established at the dinner table. That first night, Monica served a roast chicken. She carved it herself, placing the 2 juiciest pieces of breast meat onto Lily's plate. "My little princess has to eat," she'd chirped, tapping Lily on the nose. "You're growing so fast, and you're just so smart. Did you tell Greg about the award you won in art class?" My dad, who hadn't really smiled in a year, looked at Lily and managed a thin, watery grin. "That's wonderful, Lily." Monica would then look at me. Her smile was still there, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were cold, assessing. She'd slide a wing or a drumstick onto my plate without comment. And the moment I set my fork down, her voice would cut in. "Carly, sweetheart, since you're finished, why don't you help me and start clearing the plates? You're such a good helper." Or, "Carly, Lily needs to practice her piano. You're older. You can handle the dishes, right? You're Dad's strong girl." Dad's strong girl. That became my name. It sounded like a compliment, but it was a cage. Princesses were delicate. They were praised for existing. They got new dresses and the best pieces of chicken. Strong girls were functional. They were expected to be self-sufficient, to need nothing, to complain about nothing. They were the help. The disparity became a stark, undeniable line drawn through the house. At Christmas, Lily's side of the tree was overflowing. Shiny boxes, massive presents, the dollhouse she'd wanted, the new bike. My dad and Monica would watch her, beaming, as she shrieked with delight. My presents were always few, and always practical. A set of wool socks, a new textbook for school, unwrapped. 1 year, when I was 12, my only gift from them was a set of new sponges for my dishwashing chore. Lily got a kitten. I once asked Monica if I could take piano lessons, like Lily. She'd laughed that loud laugh. "Oh, honey, no. Think of the cost. Besides, your hands are too rough for that. You're more suited for practical things." My father heard it. He was sitting right there, reading the paper. He just turned the page. Greg had become completely dependent on Monica's arrangements. He craved the image of a happy, normal family she was building, and he was willing to pay any price for it. The price was me. Monica decided who sat where at dinner. Monica decided which families we visited on holidays, and Monica decided who got to go on the family vacation to the lake and who had to stay home because someone needs to watch the house. I was always the one watching the house. So I learned to stop asking for things. I stopped talking about my needs. Instead, I learned to be useful. I learned to be silent and efficient. When the kitchen faucet started leaking, I watched a video online, took the wrench from my dad's toolbox, and fixed it. When a door jammed, I was the one who knew how to unstick it. I mowed the lawn. I shoveled the driveway. I became the family handyman, the invisible force that kept the house running while Monica and Lily decorated it. I did it because I believed, in that desperate, childish way, that if I was useful enough, if I was strong enough, if I asked for nothing, they couldn't get rid of me. It was the only way I knew how to survive. The only time I ever left that house, really, was to go to my grandfather's farm. Arthur Hale, my mother's father, lived about 20 minutes outside of town. His farm was old, cluttered, and smelled like hay and engine oil. It was the complete opposite of the cold, sterile, gardenia-scented house Monica had created. I remember the first time I saw him after Monica moved in. I was about 11. He was a quiet man, weathered and tough, and he didn't say much. He just looked at me, really looked at me, in a way my father no longer did. He saw the grease under my fingernails from fixing my bike chain. He saw that my jeans were too short. He didn't ask about Monica. He didn't ask about Lily. He just asked, "What do you like doing most?" I was so startled by the question, I didn't know how to answer. It wasn't about chores. It wasn't about school. He was asking what I liked. "I like building things," I said, finally, "and fixing them." He nodded slowly. A few minutes later, as I was sitting on his porch, he came out and handed me a mug of hot cocoa. It was rich and dark, and so hot it burned my tongue. He sat in his rocker, not saying anything for a long time. Then he just said, "Are you tired, Carly?" I almost burst into tears. It was the kindest question anyone had asked me in 2 years. I just nodded, unable to speak. He nodded back, as if I'd confirmed something he already knew. He didn't interfere. He didn't storm into our house and yell at my father. He didn't confront Monica. He just watched. Every few weeks, I'd bike out to the farm, and we'd work in silence in his shed, fixing a tractor engine or reinforcing a fence, and every time, he'd make me hot cocoa and ask me quiet, simple questions that made me feel, for an hour, like I was a person and not just a function. Back then, I just thought he was the only adult who wasn't blind. I had no idea that he was taking notes. I didn't know he was cataloging every slight, every practical gift, every time I was left behind. I just knew that I was used to it. I had accepted my role. In the story of my new family, I was the last character anyone thought to write a line for. The winters in Redwood Falls weren't just cold. They were isolating. The snow fell in heavy, silent sheets, burying the world and muffling all sound, making each house its own lonely island. I remember one winter in particular. I was 13. It was Christmas Eve, the night of the big town festival in the square. There was ice skating, carolers, and a huge fireworks display at the end. It was the one night the whole town felt magical. I was standing by the door, pulling on my old coat. The sleeves were at least 3 inches too short, and the zipper strained across my chest. It was a hand-me-down from a cousin, and it had been old even when I got it. In the entryway, Monica was fussing over Lily, zipping up her brand-new bright white parka, the fluffy faux fur hood framing her face like a little snow angel. She had new gloves, a new cashmere scarf, and new insulated boots. She looked like a magazine ad. "There, my perfect girl," Monica cooed, kissing her forehead. "We can't have you catching a chill." My father was jingling his keys, anxious to go. "Everyone ready? The roads are going to get busy." We were all moving toward the door. A flurry of winter gear and excited chatter from Lily. And then, Monica stopped. She put one perfectly manicured hand to her cheek in a pantomime of sudden realization. "Oh, goodness," she gasped. "The cookies. I put a batch of gingerbread in the oven for the church bake sale tomorrow, and I completely forgot. They need to cool for at least an hour before I can pack them. I waited. I knew what was coming. She turned to me, her face a mask of sweet, apologetic concern. "Carly, sweetheart, you're so responsible. Would you be a terrible angel and just stay here to watch the oven? Just to make sure they're okay? Lily would be so heartbroken if I had to tell her we couldn't go see the fireworks because of my silly mistake." The request hung in the cold air. It was brilliant, really. It made me the savior. Lily the victim, and her the forgetful but well-meaning mother. If I said no, I was the one ruining Christmas. I looked at my dad. I saw a flicker in his eyes, a tiny brief spark of something. Conflict? Guilt? He knew what she was doing. He knew I'd been talking about the fireworks all week. He looked at me, then at Monica, and then he put on his jolly dad smile. He cleared his throat. "Carly's our best girl, right? Dad can count on you. We trust you to hold down the fort." And there it was, the strong girl trap, baited with my father's meager praise. "It's fine," I mumbled, unzipping the tight coat. "I'll stay." "Oh, you are the best," Monica chirped, already pulling Lily out the door. "Lily will tell you all about the fireworks." The front door clicked shut. The sound of the car engine starting up faded down the street, and then silence. The house was empty. The only sound was the faint tick of the kitchen timer. I walked into the living room. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on the couch by the big picture window, watching the heavy snow fall against the glass. The timer went off. I went to the kitchen, took the perfect, uniformed gingerbread men out of the oven, and slid them onto the cooling rack. My job was done. I went back to the window. In the distance, over the tops of the snow-covered pines, I could see the faint glow of the town square. An hour later, the sky to the south lit up, first red, then green, then a burst of glittering gold. The fireworks. I was watching them, a second-hand, silent version, from miles away. The local news channel was broadcasting the festival live. I turned on the TV, keeping the volume low. The screen showed bundled-up families, kids laughing, friends hugging. I could see the fireworks in bright, pixelated color. I put my hand on the screen. It was cold glass. I imagined the boom, the crackle, the smell of sulfur and cold air. I imagined being there, in the middle of it, a part of something. I closed my eyes and just pretended. I remembered something Monica had said to our neighbor, Mrs. Davies, just a few weeks earlier. They were in the kitchen, drinking coffee, and I was in the pantry, supposedly looking for flour. "Lily is so sensitive, you know," Monica had said in a confidential whisper. "She just needs all those little affirmations, the pretty things, the excitement. Carly is just so strong. She's like her father. She doesn't need all that flashy stuff." It wasn't a compliment. It was a justification. It was the license she wrote for herself to leave me behind. Because I was strong. I didn't need new coats. Because I was strong. I didn't need to see fireworks. Because I was strong. I didn't need to be protected, or celebrated, or even really seen. My strength was my punishment. That's when I started spending every possible minute at my grandfather's farm. By the time I was 15, I was practically living there on weekends. The farm was my real education. While Monica was teaching Lily how to pick out throw pillows, Grandpa Arthur was teaching me how to weld. He didn't coddle me. He'd hand me a tool and say, "Figure it out," and I would. I rewired the lights in his old barn. I helped him design and install a new irrigation system for the back fields. Sketching out the pipe layouts on a piece of plywood, I learned the tensile strength of different woods, how to frame a wall, and how to read the earth to know where to build. My hands were calloused and perpetually stained with grease or wood varnish. Grandpa Arthur rarely, if ever, mentioned Monica. He didn't badmouth my father. But one afternoon, we were sitting on the porch after spending 4 hours fixing the hydraulic lift on his tractor. He was drinking black coffee, and I was drinking the scalding hot cocoa he always made for me. He just looked out over his fields and said, People forget the cost of favoritism. Carly, they think they're just lifting one person up. They never look at what they're crushing underneath. He turned to me, his eyes clear and sharp. You're good with this stuff. You see how things fit together. That's a rare thing. At my father's house, I was a servant, expected to perform tasks I was never thanked for. At the farm, I was an apprentice. I was valued. My opinion was asked. I wasn't Dad's strong girl. I was just Carly, the one who knew how to fix the generator. One day, we were bracing a sagging corner of his porch roof. I was tired, sweaty, and happier than I ever was at home. You know, Grandpa, I said, half joking as I hammered in a lag bolt, maybe I should just build my own house out here in the woods. A small one, just for me. He stopped hammering and looked at me, a slow, rare smile spreading across his weathered face. A small house, he repeated. Maybe, or maybe one day you'll do a whole lot more than that. The idea took root. It wasn't just a joke. It became an image, a small, perfect cabin, a fortress of logs and glass, hidden in the trees, a place with a door I could lock, a place where no one could tell me to watch the oven, a place where I was the one who decided if the fireworks were worth seeing. That vision got me through high school. I dove into every shop class, every drafting program, every physics course I could. My teachers praised my designs. My tech ed instructor told me I had a natural gift for structural engineering. I brought home an award I'd won for a detailed architectural model I'd built. Monica glanced at it. A girl spending all her time with hammers and nails, she'd sighed, turning back to the catalog she was browsing. Honestly, Carly, who is going to want to date that? The night before my college applications were due, I couldn't sleep. I walked out into the backyard and sat under the old maple tree, the one that had been my mother's favorite. I looked at the house. The lights were on. Through the window, I could see the blue flicker of the TV, the shape of my father in his armchair, Monica and Lily on the sofa, laughing at something. It was a perfect picture of a happy family, and I was on the outside of the glass, in the cold. I sat there for a long time, the rough bark of the maple at my back, and for the first time, I formed a genuine, desperate prayer. I didn't pray for them to change. I didn't pray for them to see me. I just prayed. Please, the May, let me get far enough away from here that they can never call me back to watch the oven again. My prayer was answered, just not in the way I expected. The acceptance letter from Cascadia Tech University in Portland wasn't just a thick envelope, it was a life raft. It offered a near-full scholarship in sustainable construction engineering. It was 800 miles away. It was perfect. I brought the letter to the dinner table, my hands actually shaking. I felt a stupid, flickering hope that this, finally, would be the thing. This would make them see me. I held it out. I got in. Cascadia Tech. It's one of the best engineering programs in the Northwest, and I got the dean's scholarship. My father, Greg, put down his fork and took the letter. He scanned it, his brow furrowing. Portland, he said, not looking at me. That's a long way. And this scholarship, near full doesn't mean full. There's still room and board, books, fees, I don't know. Carly, it seems expensive. Monica, who was reapplying her lipstick at the table, just shrugged, looking at her reflection in her compact mirror. Why Portland? It's so damp. Why don't you just go to the community college here in Redwood? You could save us all a lot of money, and you'd still be home to help out. That's nice, Lily chimed in, not looking up from her phone. I'm auditioning for the conservatory this spring. They said my monologue work is very advanced. I stood there, the acceptance letter feeling heavy and useless in my dad's hand. He hadn't said congratulations. He hadn't said he was proud. He had seen my achievement and immediately calculated its cost. Monica had seen it as an inconvenience. I took the letter back. I'm going, I said, my voice quiet but flat. I'll figure out the rest. The only person who understood was Grandpa Arthur. I biked out to the farm the next day to tell him. He was in the barn, mending a piece of tack, I told him I was leaving for Oregon. He stopped his work. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes tracing the set of my jaw. He didn't say much, just nodded slowly. But then he did something he rarely did. He pulled me into a hug. It was rough and smelled like sawdust and hay. "You always were too big for this valley, Carly," he murmured into my hair. When I was packing my dad's old truck to leave, he walked up and pressed a small, worn envelope into my hand. "Don't open it till you're on the road," he said. 2 hours later, parked at a gas station just over the state line, I opened it. Inside was a check for $2,000. It was an enormous sum for him. In the memo line, he had written, in his shaky script, "For the tools, not the books." I cried for the first time in years, right there in the cab of my truck, tasting the salt and the diesel fumes. That $2,000 was all the savings he had, and it was the only real inheritance I ever expected to get. Portland was as wet and gray as Monica had predicted, and I had never been happier. The scholarship covered my tuition, but just as my father had pointed out, it didn't cover life. I got a job on a construction site downtown, framing luxury condos. I was the only woman on the crew, and the first week was hell. The men either ignored me or hit on me. But I knew how to work. I showed up 20 minutes early. I carried my own weight. And then some. I could frame a wall faster and straighter than most of them. After a few weeks, the foreman started giving me the complex jobs, the ones that required reading the prints, not just swinging a hammer. My hands, already calloused from the farm, blistered, split, and bled. I'd come back to my tiny dorm room, smelling of sawdust and sweat, and soak them in salt water just so I could hold a pencil. My classes were my sanctuary. I wasn't a strong girl. I was a good engineer. I spent my nights in the drafting studio, sketching designs for small, energy-efficient homes. Houses that could be built quickly, cheaply, but were strong. Houses that were safe. The holidays were the hardest. I couldn't afford a flight home for Thanksgiving. I sat in my silent dorm, the entire building echoing and empty. My dinner was a cup of ramen noodles, the hot water poured from the cheap electric kettle I'd bought at a thrift store. I made the mistake of scrolling through my phone. Monica had posted a photo. It was a perfect, warm, golden hour picture of the family at the dinner table. My father at the head, Monica beside him, Lily and her new boyfriend, all of them raising a glass, their smiles wide and bright. The caption read, "So beyond blessed to have my whole family together for Thanksgiving. My heart is full, feeling so grateful." My whole family. I stared at the words. I wasn't just absent. I had been erased. I was 800 miles away, eating noodle soup in an empty building, and she had photoshopped me out of existence. I threw the phone across the room and went back to my blueprints. That night, something in me hardened. The loneliness turned into a different kind of fuel. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about building something they couldn't ignore. I joined a research group at Cascadia focused on low-cost housing solutions. We were studying prefab models, modular construction, and sustainable materials. I looked at the problems of building quickly and affordably, and I realized I had been training for this my entire life. I knew how to build strong. I knew how to be efficient, and I knew, better than anyone, what it felt like to not have a safe place to call home. I met a guy in the program, Ben, who was a genius with software and logistics. I had the engineering and the construction background. We started talking. We started dreaming. After graduation, we didn't take the high-paying corporate jobs. We pooled the little money we had, took out a terrifyingly large loan, and rented a freezing, oil-stained old auto garage in an industrial park. We bought used tools. We called ourselves Skyline Haven. The first 2 years were brutal. We were hemorrhaging money. We were freezing. We lived on coffee and fear. I was chief designer, lead carpenter, and the entire janitorial staff. I was always the first one there, unlocking the garage in the dark at 5 in the morning, and the last one to leave, sweeping up sawdust at 10 at night. I designed. I built the frames. I drove the truck. I insulated walls. And in my spare time, I put on my one good blazer and pitched our models to tiny community banks and skeptical local developers. They saw a woman in her mid-20s, with calluses on her hands, talking about prefab sustainable housing. Most of them smiled politely and showed me the door. I was in the garage one night, spreadsheets open on my laptop, the numbers red, red, red. When my phone rang, it was Monica. "Carly, we barely hear from you," she said, her voice dripping with that false, sugary concern. "Are you still playing with those hammers in that little garage of yours?" "It's a company, Monica," I said, rubbing my temples. "Well, whatever it is, I hope you're meeting some nice people. You're not getting any younger. When are you going to settle down? Find a husband? You'll never meet a man doing all that wood stuff. You should see Lily. She just got a new role. She's going to be in a regional car dealership commercial. She doesn't even have any lines. But they said her look is exactly what they want." I looked at my hands, stained and sore. I looked at the massive, complex design on my screen. I looked at the red ink on my balance sheet. "That's great for her. Monica, I have to go. I have work." "Always work with you," she sighed, the disappointment clear in her voice. "Well, don't forget about us when you're successful." I hung up the phone. I understood in that moment, with a cold, perfect clarity, what I had only sensed before. They would never see me. They would never pull out a chair for me at the table. Waiting for them to acknowledge me was a waste of my life. You can't wait for people like that to give you a place. You have to build your own. I turned away from the balance sheet and looked at the wall above my workbench. Tacked to the drywall was the blueprint, the log and glass house, the dream I'd shared with my grandfather. I touched the paper. "When I build this, Grandpa," I whispered to the empty, freezing garage, "I swear, you'll be the first person I invite." 3 weeks later, after being rejected by 11 banks, a small, independent developer from a Seattle suburb, who had a reputation for risky green projects, called us back. He didn't just like our designs, he loved them. He didn't want one house. He wanted a pilot program of 12. It was the first contract. It wasn't just a contract. It was a lifeline. We started building, and as the first modular pieces were trucked up the highway, word began to spread. Skyline Haven was getting orders, first from other suburbs, then from the city. The foundation was set. The first contract for 12 homes felt like a miracle, but the event that changed everything, the one that took Skyline Haven from a promising startup to a national name, was a catastrophe. A series of atmospheric rivers slammed into the Oregon coast, causing a catastrophic 100-year flood. An entire valley was submerged. Thousands of people lost everything, their homes washed away or rendered uninhabitable. FEMA was overwhelmed, and the nonprofits scrambling to help were facing a housing crisis in the middle of a brutal, wet winter. One of those nonprofits, one we had pitched to a year prior and been politely rejected by, called us in a panic. Their usual suppliers for temporary trailers were backlogged for months. They needed shelter, and they needed it now. "How fast can you deliver?" the director asked, his voice strained with exhaustion. "We don't deliver trailers," I said, pulling up our inventory. "We deliver homes. We can have the first 4 units on site, fully insulated, and ready for utility hookup in 72 hours. He was silent for a beat. "You're lying." "I'm not," I said. "Try me." He ordered 6. We delivered them in 2 days. They were warm, dignified, and solid. They weren't trailers. They were small, strong houses. The families who moved in, who had lost everything, wept. A local news crew filmed a mother turning on the lights in her new kitchen, her hands shaking. By the end of the week, the director called back and ordered 60. It was like a dam breaking. Our simple, sustainable, strong designs were the perfect solution for emergency housing. Our phones didn't stop ringing. We weren't just a green building company anymore. We were a first response solution. The local Seattle papers ran a story. Local startup provides real homes for flood victims. That story was picked up by the national wires. Within a month, Architectural Digest ran an online feature, not on the houses, but on me. They called me the young engineer redefining low-cost housing. They used a photo of me from the factory floor, sawdust in my hair, safety goggles pushed up on my head, smiling and holding a set of blueprints. I was proud. It was the first time in my life I felt a solid, unshakable sense of professional pride. I sent the link to the article to my father's email address, with the subject line, "A little news from Seattle." I waited a few days. Nothing. Finally, I called. Monica answered. "Oh, hello, Carly," she said, her voice distracted. I could hear a TV game show in the background. "Your father's outside." Did he get my email?" "Your email? Oh, the article thing?" "Yes, I think he saw it. Very nice, dear." She paused. "You look a little rough in that photo. You should really think about wearing some makeup if you're going to be in the paper, but still, good for you. It's nice you're doing all right, I guess." Doing all right? I was on the front page of the biggest architectural magazine in the country, and she was critiquing my lack of mascara. "Anyway," she continued, "I have to run. Lily is thinking of getting new headshots, and I'm helping her pick a photographer. It's all very exciting." She hung up. I just stood there, looking at my own reflection in the dark window of my office. It didn't even sting anymore. It was just data. It was the confirmation that I was right. They would never, ever see. But other people did see. A few months after the media blitz, I got a call from a name I didn't recognize. It was the executive vice president of Veltman Construction, one of the largest building conglomerates in North America. They wanted a meeting. Ben and I flew to their headquarters in Chicago. We sat in a 40th floor boardroom, a long table of dark, polished wood, surrounded by men in $10,000 suits. They didn't just want to partner with us. They didn't want to license our tech. They wanted to buy us. The number they put on the table was staggering. It was so large it felt like a joke. After a long, terrifying negotiation, we settled on a final figure. They would acquire 90% of Skyline Haven for a cash sum north of $60 million. Ben and I would each retain a 5% stake and a seat on the advisory board, but our day-to-day involvement would be over. I was 29 years old. The signing was 2 weeks later, in the same boardroom. I was wearing my one good suit, the one I'd bought for pitching. I sat there, the thick, heavy stock of the contract in front of me, a sleek, expensive pen placed perfectly beside it. The room was silent as I read the final page. All I could hear was the hum of the HVAC system, and in my head, I was somewhere else entirely. I was 13 years old, sitting alone in the dark, my hand pressed against the cold glass of the living room TV. I was watching the pixelated explosion of fireworks I hadn't been invited to. I was the strong girl, the one who didn't need anything, the one left behind to watch the cookies. My hand was shaking, not from fear, not from excitement. It was shaking with the sheer, crushing weight of the release. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Ms. Grant? Is everything all right?" I looked up. I picked up the pen. It was heavy and cold, just like the glass. I signed my name. "Everything," I said, my voice perfectly steady, "is fine." The money appeared in my newly created private bank account 24 hours later. It was just a long string of numbers. It didn't feel real. But the freedom did. My first purchase wasn't a car or a vacation. It was anonymity. I hired a top-tier legal firm to create a quiet, ironclad LLC, C.A. Hale Holdings, using my mother's maiden name. Through that company, I made 2 purchases. The first was the penthouse at the Harborview Tower in Seattle. It was all glass and steel and open space, looking out over the water. It was the antithesis of the cluttered, judgmental house I grew up in. It was a silent fortress in the sky. The second purchase was back home. A massive 500-acre tract of old-growth forest bordering my grandfather's farm had come up for sale. It was being sold off by a logging company that had gone bankrupt. Through my LLC, I bought the entire parcel, cash. The deed was registered to C.A. Hale Holdings. No one in Redwood Falls knew. With the keys to my new, empty life, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my father.
Hi, Dad.
Carly, hi, how's Seattle? It's good. It's good. Hey, I just wanted to let you know I got a big promotion at work. I'm moving up, senior project manager. A promotion? That's wonderful, honey, he said, and I could hear the genuine, simple pride in his voice. See, Monica? I told you she was doing great. That's our strong girl. I heard her voice, muffled, in the background. That's nice. Ask her if she's free in October. Lily's baby is due, and she'll need someone to help. A project manager can probably take time off, right? My father relayed the message. So, Lily's having a girl. Can you believe I'm going to be a grandfather? Anyway, Monica was just saying, it would be a huge, huge help if you could come back for a few weeks when the baby comes. You've always been so good with that stuff. I closed my eyes. A promotion, and their first thought was to ask me to be a nanny. I'll check my schedule. Dad, I said, talk to you soon. The second call was to Grandpa Arthur. Grandpa, it's Carly. I know who it is. His voice crackled over the line. You sound different. I am different. Grandpa, listen. Do you remember that drawing we made? In the barn? The house in the woods? There was a long pause. I remember it, he said, his voice suddenly thick. Well, I said, my own voice breaking a little. I built it. It's done. And when I'm ready to show it, I want you to be the first one to see it. I want you to come over. Carly, he said, and I could hear the confusion. What are you talking about? You built a model? Something like that, I said. Just promise me you'll come when I invite you. It's on the old Miller land, the big forest tract north of your property. The Miller land? He gasped. Child, that's 500 acres. That's sold to some big corporation from... Just promise me, Grandpa... I'll be there. Carly, you just tell me when. I hung up and immediately called the most exclusive architectural firm in Seattle. I told them I had a piece of land in Wyoming and an unlimited budget. I had one condition. I wanted my house, Cedar Ridge Estate, to be finished in 6 months, and I wanted them to plant a tree in the front yard, a mature 20-foot-tall maple tree. For the next few months, I lived my double life. In Seattle, I was the quiet, anonymous millionaire, overseeing the interior design of my penthouse. In Wyoming, I was, according to my family, the project manager who was doing okay. Monica, meanwhile, was in heaven. Lily's pregnancy, and then the birth of my niece, gave her an endless supply of content. Her social media was a shrine to her perfect family. Lily, the glowing mother, Greg, the doting grandfather, and Monica, the proud, glamorous matriarch. At family gatherings I was forced to attend. She would pat my hand and tell her friends, "This is Greg's other daughter, Carly. She's in construction, way up in Seattle. She's very independent. We're all so proud of Lily. Of course, she's the real success. A mother. There's no higher calling, is there?" I just smiled. I nodded. I played the part. Because I was watching my own project. I was watching Cedar Ridge Estate rise from the forest floor, a masterpiece of timber and glass, a house built from spite and dreams. Then, one day in early October, my phone rang. It was Grandpa Arthur. His voice wasn't his usual gruff self. It was low and heavy. "Carly, your stepmother, she's turning 50 at the end of the month." "I know," I said, bracing myself. "I already got the text from Dad. Come early to help." I was invited, too, he said, ignoring my comment. "She sent a formal invitation. She wants me there. She wants the whole family there." "Okay," I said, confused. "Are you going?" "I am, and I want you to be there." "Grandpa, I'm not sure." "You need to be there, Carly," he interrupted, and his voice had a new, sharp edge to it. "I have a feeling this is an important one. Some things only change when everyone is present." He paused, and his next words sent a chill down my spine. Are you ready? I didn't know what I was supposed to be ready for. I didn't know what he was planning, or if he was planning anything at all. But I heard the weight in his voice. It wasn't a request. It was a summons from the only person in my family who had ever seen me. I'm ready, Grandpa, I said. I'll be there. The 800-mile drive from Seattle to Redwood Falls is a strange kind of time travel. You start in the clouds, in the steel and glass and digital present, and as you drive east, the landscape widens, the roads get rougher, and the clock seems to wind backward. This time, I didn't go straight to my father's house. I took the detour. I turned off the main highway onto the unmarked, winding gravel road that the locals still called the Old Miller Tract. To me, it was just my road. The black iron gates, disguised to look like a simple cattle fence, slid open silently with a click of the remote I kept in my console. I drove up the long, private road for almost a mile, the forest thick and silent on either side, and then the trees opened up, and there it was. Cedar Ridge Estate. It was almost finished. The massive, hand-hewn Douglas fir logs were stained a deep, warm cedar that glowed in the afternoon light. The walls of glass, stretching 2 stories high, reflected the Wyoming pines back at themselves. It was a fortress of timber and light. My design, my money, my land. I got out of the car. The construction crews were gone for the day. The only sound was the wind moving through the high branches. I walked up the wide stone steps onto the wraparound porch, my boots echoing on the thick planks. I leaned against a support pillar so massive I couldn't wrap my arms around it, and I just breathed. The air here was different. It smelled of pine resin and damp earth, not the thick, cloying gardenia scent Monica always wore. I looked at the young, strong maple tree my landscaping team had planted in the center of the expansive front yard. It was a promise. A fleeting thought, almost a laugh, bubbled up. I pictured inviting them here, Monica, Greg, Lily. What would they even do in this space? Monica would hate the rustic beams. Lily would complain about the lack of cell service. My father would walk around, touching everything, his brow furrowed, silently calculating what it all cost. I smiled to myself, a short, dry sound in the vast cathedral silence of the woods. They would only come if they thought there was something in it for them. Well, I thought, buttoning my jacket against the creeping evening chill, maybe soon there will be. I got back in my car and drove to the house I'd been summoned to. I parked 3 blocks away, a habit I'd formed to avoid being blocked in the driveway. As I walked up the cracked concrete path, I could hear the party already in full swing. My father's house, the one that held all the ghosts of my childhood, was draped in Monica's signature style. The backyard, the same yard where I'd been left to watch the oven, was strangled in cheap, bright white string lights. They were draped over every bush and nailed to the side of the house, giving the entire scene a harsh, theatrical glare. A huge vinyl banner stretched between the old maple tree and a gutter pipe. In glittering gold letters, it screamed, "Happy 50th, Monica, our queen." I took a deep breath, feeling the old familiar weight settle in my stomach. This wasn't a party, it was a coronation. I walked through the side gate. The yard was packed, 40, maybe 50 people. Relatives I saw once a year, neighbors Monica wanted to impress. A catered buffet table lined one side of the fence, and a rented bar was set up on the other. And in the absolute center of it all, as always, was Monica. She was wearing a skin-tight, sequined red dress that glittered under the harsh lights. It was a dress that demanded to be looked at. She was holding court, a glass of champagne in one hand, while Lily stood dutifully beside her, looking exhausted and holding her new baby. Every phone camera, every set of eyes, was aimed at them. Monica, the glamorous matriarch. Lily, the perfect daughter and new mother. The dynasty. Monica saw me walk in. Her wide, performative smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. It was the flicker of a rattlesnake's tail. She disengaged from her conversation and marched over, her high heels sinking into the soft grass. Oh, Carly, you're here, she said. Her voice was bright. But just for me. There was an edge of ice. Finally. Happy birthday, Monica. Thank you, she said, already turning away. Thank goodness you made it. I am absolutely drowning out here. Be a dear and run inside. Will you? The dessert plates are still on the kitchen counter, and they need to be brought out. And check the ice at the bar while you're at it. It looks low. It wasn't a request. It was a chore list. I hadn't even set my purse down. Before I could answer, my father appeared, intercepting me with a clumsy one-armed hug. He smelled faintly of whiskey and anxiety. Hey, kiddo, you made it. Big night. Huh? He gestured proudly at the buzzing yard. He was so desperate for this vision of a happy family to be real. He clapped me on the shoulder, a little too hard, and turned to my Uncle Ron, who was standing nearby holding a beer. This is my girl, Carly, my father announced, with a big, fake laugh. The one I was telling you about. Best with manual labor in the whole family. Uncle Ron chuckled politely. Good to have someone handy around, I guess. I just stared at my father. Manual labor. I co-founded and sold a multi-million-dollar corporation based on complex structural engineering and sustainable logistics, and he just reduced me to the family handyman, the strong girl who could fix a faucet. I was passed off to my Aunt Clara, who cornered me by the drink tub with a look of intense, invasive pity. Carly, my goodness, look at you, she said, grasping my arm. You look healthy. Still working on those construction sites up in Seattle? All that heavy lifting? It must be so tough for a single girl. It's mostly engineering and design, Aunt Clara, I said, my voice flat. I'm a project manager. Oh, that's nice, dear. She waved away the distinction. But still single? Don't you worry. A good, strong man appreciates a woman who isn't afraid of hard work. You'll find someone eventually. You just have to, soften up a bit. Another relative chimed in. When are you finally going to move back home where you belong? Carly, all this running around in Seattle? Family is what's important. Family. I just nodded and smiled. The same empty, non-committal smile I'd perfected over 20 years. I felt like an anthropologist, observing a tribe I was related to but would never be a part of. My eyes scanned the yard, searching for the one person who wasn't part of the performance. And I found him. Grandpa Arthur. He was sitting alone in a plastic lawn chair, tucked away in the shadows at the far corner of the yard, right near the base of the old maple tree. He wasn't talking to anyone. He wasn't drinking. He was just sitting and watching. Our eyes met across the crowded lawn. He didn't smile. He just gave me one. Slow, deliberate nod. It was a nod that said, I see you. I'm here. Stay strong. But there was something else in his eyes I couldn't place. A tension, a sharp, worried energy. He was waiting for something. A little while later, Monica tapped a spoon against her champagne glass, calling for silence. It was time for the speech. She stepped up onto the small brick patio, using it as her personal stage. Okay, everyone, quiet down, she trilled, her voice amplified by a small microphone someone had produced. I just want to say thank you all for coming to my Big 5-0. She let out that high, theatrical laugh. I am just so blessed, she said, placing a hand on her chest. I have my wonderful, handsome, supportive husband, Greg, who made all of this possible. She blew him a kiss. My father looked like he'd just won an award. I have my beautiful, talented daughter, Lily, she continued, who made me a grandmother this year. My heart is just so full. Lily dutifully held up the baby, and the crowd cooed and applauded. The speech went on for 10 minutes. She thanked her neighbors for the casserole they'd brought. She thanked the caterer. She thanked her florist. She thanked her hairstylist by name. She was winding down, raising her glass for the final toast. I genuinely thought she was going to forget me entirely, but then, as an afterthought, she glanced in my direction. Oh, and of course, I have to give a special thank you to Carly, she said, her voice bright and patronizing. She came all the way from Seattle to be here. She's always been such a great helper to this family. We're just so glad you could be here to assist. Let's hear it for Carly. A spattering of polite, confused applause. A few of my cousins, the ones who knew the real dynamic, shot me quick, pitying glances before looking down at their shoes. They knew. They all knew it was an insult, a deliberate demotion from daughter to helper, and as always, they said nothing. I felt the heat rise in my face, a hot, shameful flush. I swallowed it. I swallowed it all down. Just like I had swallowed the cold Christmas Eve and the wool sock presents, I even clapped along, a brittle smile frozen on my face, pretending I was in on the joke. The party noise swelled again. I moved to the edge of the yard, standing in the shadows by the fence, just trying to be invisible, but Monica wasn't finished. Flushed with champagne and the success of her speech, she marched over to me. The crowd-pleasing smile was gone. Her eyes were hard and cold. "Listen to me," she hissed, her voice a low, sharp whisper, even as her face remained tilted in a polite smile for anyone who might be watching. "I saw you talking to Clara. Don't you dare try to make a scene tonight. This is my night. It is my 50th birthday. This is not about you, and it is not about your little wood projects in Seattle. Nobody here cares. Do you understand me? Do not embarrass me." I kept my voice perfectly level, a trick I'd learned from years of boardroom negotiations. "Monica, I am not trying to make a scene. I'm just here because Dad invited me. I'm happy to celebrate you." My calm, my refusal to be baited, seemed to pour gasoline on her fire. "Oh, celebrate me?" she spat, taking a step closer. "You think you can just show up and play the good daughter? You abandoned this family. You ran off to play with your hammers and nails while I was here, raising Lily, taking care of your father, making this house a home. You don't know the first thing about sacrifice." Just then, from across the yard, Lily's baby, who had been fussy all evening, let out a sharp, sudden wail. Lily looked flustered, bouncing the infant and trying to shush her. Monica's head snapped toward the sound, and then back to me. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated venom. "See," she spat, gesturing toward the crying child. "You're here for 10 minutes and everything falls apart. You bring this chaos with you. You always have." As she was hissing the word chaos, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. It was Grandpa Arthur. He stood up from his plastic chair, but he didn't walk toward us. He didn't come to intervene. He just calmly, deliberately, took 2 steps to his right. He moved until his body was almost entirely obscured behind the thick, dark trunk of the old maple tree. He was hidden, but from his new vantage point, he had a perfect, unobstructed, unseen line of sight directly to me and Monica. He was in position. And I felt it, the roar. It was 20 years of being the helper. It was every winter I was left behind. It was every manual labor joke and every pitying glance. It was abandoned and sacrifice and chaos. It all rose up in my throat like hot lava. The air in the backyard, filled with laughter and light, suddenly felt thin and electric. The storm wasn't coming. It was here. Monica didn't stay by my side. She didn't need to. I was dismissed. She went back to the center of the yard, the glittering red hub of her own universe, and gathered a fresh circle of relatives around her. She was 3 or 4 glasses of champagne deep now, and her voice was getting louder, the carefully constructed facade of the gracious hostess starting to crack. She was on her favorite topic, sacrifice. "I mean, you all know what I've given up for this family," she slurred, just loud enough for half the yard to hear. "I took on a teenager, Greg's daughter. When I had a perfectly good child of my own, I gave that girl everything, a roof over her head, food, clothes. You'd think there'd be a little gratitude, but no. Some kids, they just love to play the victim." A few people nodded politely, sipping their drinks, their eyes darting nervously toward me. I was the unnamed girl she was slandering in front of 50 people. I just stood there, my back to the fence, trying to dissolve into the shadows.
My Uncle Ron, probably trying to change the subject and be kind, broke away from her circle and walked over to me. "Hey, Carly," he said, keeping his voice low. Don't listen to that. She's just had a few. So, tell me, what is it you actually do up in Seattle? Your dad says construction, but you said project manager. What's that mean? You designing these things?" It was a simple, honest question, and for the first time that night, I gave an honest, simple answer. "I'm in the sustainable prefab industry," I said, my voice quiet. "My company, Skyline Haven, we design high-efficiency modular homes." Before Ron could even reply, Monica's head whipped around. She had been listening. She marched over, her heels digging into the lawn, a bright, dangerous smile plastered on her face. "Oh, Ron, don't let her bore you with all that," she interrupted, looping her arm through his. "She just makes it sound so fancy." She turned to me, her eyes glittering with malice. "Tell him the truth. Carly, you work on a construction site. It's dirty, heavy work. She's a worker. It's not glamorous. Believe me, not like our Lily. Now she's the artist. She's got real talent." A few of her friends, standing nearby, tittered, that dismissive, polite laughter that feels like small, sharp stones being thrown at you. And that was it. The dam I had spent 20 years building, a dam of silence, of utility, of being the strong girl who never complained, who just fixed the sink and watched the oven. It didn't just crack, it vaporized. For the first time in my life, standing in that backyard, I didn't swallow it. "I'm not a construction worker, Monica," I said. My voice was calm. It was so calm it surprised me. It was the voice I used in the boardroom, the one that meant I am done negotiating. Monica's smile twitched. "What did you say?" I said, "I'm not a worker. I co-founded the company, the one I designed the homes for." I looked at her, and I let a small piece of the truth out into the air. "And I sold my majority stake in it last year. So, no, I'm not a worker." The yard didn't go silent, but the conversations around us faltered. People were listening. Monica's face, which had been flushed with champagne, went from pink to a deep, blotchy red. I had challenged her. I had contradicted her narrative in front of her audience. I had taken the spotlight she believed was hers by divine right. "Don't you dare," she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Don't you dare come into my home, on my birthday, and tell these lies." "It's not a lie." "You are trying to steal my night," she accused, jabbing a finger toward me, her hand shaking. "You've always been like this, jealous of Lily, jealous of me, always trying to make everything about you. You walk around with that sad little face like the whole world owes you something." "I don't think the world owes me anything," I said, and I was shocked to find I was perfectly, icily calm. The rage I'd felt building had coalesced into something cold and hard and clear. "I just wanted to be treated like I was part of this family, but I wasn't. I was staff. I worked hard to escape that. I worked hard to get to a place where I didn't have to ask your permission just to exist." "Permission?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You ungrateful?" She took a step closer, her face inches from mine. I could smell the champagne and the thick, suffocating scent of her gardenia perfume. "If you're so rich and so great," she spat, "if you're this big-shot co-founder, then why haven't you done anything for this family? Huh? Why don't you help us? Why is your grandfather, that old man, still having to work his fingers to the bone on that broken-down farm?" That was the line. She could insult me. She could call me a liar. Jealous, ungrateful. She could have done it all night. But she didn't get to use my grandfather. She didn't get to use the one person who had ever been kind to me as a weapon against me. "Don't you talk about him," I said. The ice was gone, replaced by a sudden, white-hot fire. "You don't get to say his name, ever." I took a step forward, and for the first time, she instinctively flinched back. "I have helped,"
I said, my voice shaking now, but with rage, not fear. But I help him, not you, and I don't help because you gave me a roof over my head. You gave me a list of chores. What you did to me for 20 years wasn't sacrifice. It was favoritism. You didn't raise me. You just found a clever way to get free labor. That's enough, my father's voice suddenly boomed. He came stumbling between us, his face panicked. That's enough. Both of you. It's a party. Monica, honey, calm down. Carly, just apologize.
Apologize? I stared at him, dumbfounded.
But Monica was beyond reason. She was in a full narcissistic rage. My father's weak attempt to shield me was, in her mind, a betrayal. You're taking her side? She screamed at him. And then she turned on me. It was so fast. She wasn't a mother. She wasn't a hostess. She was a brawler. She lunged past my father's outstretched arm and grabbed my left wrist. Her acrylic nails dug into my skin, and she yanked me toward her, pulling me off balance. You listen to me, you little... I am 30 years old. I am an adult. I am not the 13-year-old girl she left by the oven. I planted my feet and yanked my arm back. Get your hands off me. I tried to twist my arm out of her grip, but she held on. Her face contorted, and with her free hand, she swung. It wasn't a tap. It wasn't a mistake. It was a full-force, open-palmed, deliberate swing, meant to cause pain and humiliation. The sound it made was shocking. A single, sharp crack that echoed across the entire, suddenly silent backyard. It was louder than the music, louder than the laughter. It was the sound of a line being crossed that could never be uncrossed. My head snapped to the side. The sting was instant, sharp and hot on my cheek. But the pain wasn't the thing that shocked me. I've had worse from snapped lumber on a job site. It was the silence. The music had stopped. The chatter had stopped. In that one horrible second, the only sound in the entire world was the high, thin tinkle of a champagne flute slipping from someone's stunned hand and shattering on the patio bricks. And then, I heard the gasps, the sharp, horrified intakes of breath from my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. They had all seen it. I turned my head back, slowly, to look at her. Monica was breathing hard, her chest heaving, her eyes wide and wild, her hand still raised. My father was frozen, his mouth open, his hands still hovering uselessly in the air between us. And then I screamed. It wasn't a scream for help. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a roar. It was 20 years of silence. It was every dish I'd washed, every lonely Christmas, every time I'd been called strong instead of loved. It was a raw, primal sound of pure, undiluted rage, torn from the deepest part of me. Every single person at that party, who had been watching in stunned silence, flinched as if they had been the ones who were hit. And in that moment, as the scream tore out of my throat, my eyes, blurred with sudden, hot tears, lifted from Monica's face. I looked past her, past my father, past the shocked faces of my relatives. My gaze landed on the far corner of the yard, on the old, dark trunk of the maple tree. And I saw him. Grandpa Arthur? He was standing exactly where he had been, half hidden behind the trunk. But he wasn't watching me with horror. He wasn't rushing forward to save me. His arm was raised. In his steady, weathered hand, he was holding his smartphone. The screen was bright blue in the darkness of the shadows. The small red light of the camera was on. He was recording. He had been recording everything. His eyes met mine across the yard. They weren't panicked. They weren't even angry. They were sharp, cold, and clear as ice. They were the eyes of a man who had been waiting a very, very long time for this exact moment. I stopped screaming. My breath hitched. I wasn't a victim, crying out in the darkness. I was a witness. And I finally understood. I wasn't alone. The chaos after the slap was immediate and messy. The silence broke into a dozen different, panicked sounds. My Aunt Clara gasped, her hand flying to her pearls. Uncle Ron, who had been laughing a minute before, just looked at Monica with a new, hard expression of pure disgust. Lily burst into terrified tears, clutching her baby, and fled into the house. The party was over. A few of Monica's friends, the Buffers, lurched into action, their faces a mask of strained sobriety. "Oh, Monica, dear, you've had far too much champagne," one of them said, grabbing her arm. "Let's get you inside. Get you some water." "He took her side!" Monica shrieked, still trying to get at me, but they were already steering her, stumbling and furious, toward the back door. "He took her side!" I was left standing in the center of the yard, trembling. My hand pressed to my face. The skin was hot, throbbing, and alive with a pain that was more than just physical. It was a brand. The sound of that slap was a door slamming shut. Forever. My father rushed over, his face pale and clammy. He looked, in that moment, weak and terrified.
"Carly," he stammered, his hands fluttering uselessly. "Carly, kiddo, I am so sorry. She gets worked up. The party, the stress. She didn't mean it. It was an accident. Her hand it slipped." Her hand slipped. I just stared at him. I stared at the man who was my father, the one who had just watched his daughter be assaulted, and his first, immediate instinct was to make an excuse for the abuser. I didn't say a word. I just let him see the look in my eyes. I let him see that his excuse was pathetic, and that I knew it, and that he had just failed his final test. He flinched and looked away, unable to hold my gaze. The remaining guests were grabbing their purses and jackets, making hurried, awkward exits into the night. "Tell Monica, happy birthday. We really must be going. Such a lovely evening." They fled, their eyes darting everywhere except at me, abandoning the scene of the crime. I was alone, standing in the wreckage of my stepmother's 50th birthday party. Then, from the corner of the yard, he emerged. Grandpa Arthur stepped out from behind the trunk of the maple tree. His face was like granite. He calmly slid his smartphone into his breast pocket and buttoned the flap. He walked straight past my father, who was still muttering. It was a mistake, just a mistake, as if I was the one who needed convincing. He stopped directly in front of me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He just looked at my face, at the bright red handprint that was now blooming on my cheek, and then he met my eyes. His were clear, steady, and full of a cold, hard purpose. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and quiet. "To stop being the victim, Carly?" The question was so direct, so practical, that it shocked a sound out of me. It was a harsh, dry, broken laugh that scraped my throat. "Grandpa," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "After that, I don't think I have a choice anymore." "Good," he said. He took my elbow in his strong, calloused grip. "Let's walk. We're done here." He steered me out of the side gate, away from the harsh string lights and the shattered glass. We didn't get in his truck. We just walked, leaving my father's house behind. We crossed the dark, empty street and walked into the open pasture that bordered the property, the land silvered by a high, cold moon. We stopped, and the only sound was the wind moving through the dry autumn grass. He pulled the phone from his pocket again. "You need to see this," he said. He hit play. I watched, in shaky, damning, surprisingly clear footage, the entire scene. I heard my own voice, sharp and steady. "It was favoritism. You didn't raise me. You just found a clever way to get free labor." I saw Monica's face twist into a mask of pure rage. I saw her lunge. I saw my father's pathetic attempt to intervene. I saw her grab my arm. I saw her hand swing, fast and brutal. I saw my head snap back. And I heard the crack. He had captured all of it. The words, the violence, the sound. "You recorded it," I breathed, my whole body numb. "Every second," he said, "and it's not the first one." He swiped his thumb across the screen. A new video started.
This one was from inside his truck, in the parking lot of the grocery store. Dated 6 months ago, I was helping him unload feed. The camera was zoomed in on Monica and my father, who hadn't seen us. They were in their own car. Monica was gesturing angrily. Her voice was muffled, but the audio was still clear enough. "Don't care if she's doing well," she was saying. "If she wants to be part of this family, she can start paying her share. Your father is getting old. That land is worth a fortune. She owes us." My blood ran cold. He swiped again, another video. This one from last Christmas, filmed from the hallway. I was in the kitchen, and Monica was there. "Just put those gifts in the back of the closet." "Carly," her voice said, sharp and annoyed. "Lily got so many wonderful things. We don't have room under the tree for your practical, homemade stuff." "Grandpa," I whispered, finally looking up at him. I was shaking, not from the cold, but from a revelation so vast it terrified me. "Why? Why did you just film this? You've been watching this happen. Why didn't you do something? Why let it get this far?" He put the phone away and looked at me, and his face, in the pale moonlight, was a landscape of deep, profound sadness and an even deeper resolve. "Child," he said, his voice rough, "what do you think would have happened if I had stepped in? If I'd stormed in there tonight, before she hit you, and yelled at her for calling you a liar?" He answered his own question before I could. "I'll tell you, she would have turned on me. She would have called me a meddling, senile old man, and then she, and your father, would have turned on you. They would have said you were a tattletale, that you were too sensitive, that you'd misunderstood, that you were the one causing the drama. I would have been the villain, and you would have been the hysterical, ungrateful child." He sighed, a deep, weary sound. "I tried to talk to Greg, years ago, right after your mother died, and he brought this woman into the house. I warned him. I told him, 'You are letting her poison your own child. You are trading your daughter for a comfortable life.' And you know what he told me? He told me to mind my own business. He told me I didn't understand the sacrifices Monica was making." He locked his gaze on mine, and I saw the iron in his soul. "I learned a long time ago, Carly, you cannot tell a blind man the truth. You have to show him, and you have to wait. You have to wait until they've built their own gallows, and then you have to let them walk right up to it, in front of the whole world." "Wait for what?" I asked. "For this," he said. "For a night like tonight, for her to finally drop the mask in a way that no one, not even your father, can excuse. And I was waiting for you to be ready." He paused, shifting his feet. "About 2 years ago, you remember when you sent me those drawings? On your computer?" My drawings?" "The ones for the dairy barn," he said. "The ones for reinforcing the roof trusses and adding the new workshop, with the skylights. You said it was just a little idea." "I remember," I said, confused. "It was just a quick project." "It wasn't," he said, and I heard a rumble of deep pride in his voice. "It was a professional blueprint. I took those drawings to the bank to get a loan for the materials. The bank manager looked at them for 10 minutes and approved it on the spot. He said it was the best designed retrofitting he'd ever seen." He took a deep breath. "I went home that day, and I looked at those drawings, and I thought about your father, who thinks maintenance is changing a light bulb, and I thought about Lily, who's never done a day of real work in her life, and I knew who my mother's blood ran in. It wasn't Greg, it was you. You're the builder. Carly, just like she was." My heart was pounding. "Grandpa, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," he said, his voice flat and final, "that I went to my lawyer in town the very next day, and I changed my will." The world seemed to tilt. The field, the moon, the cold air. "The farm," he said, ticking the items off on his fingers. "The house, all 500 acres of the land, my shares in the Hale Agricultural Co-op, which are significant. It all goes to you. Carly, 100%. He held up his hand as I started to protest, to gasp, to say no. "And," he added, The will specifically states that you, and only you, as the sole proprietor, have the absolute, binding legal right to decide who is permitted to live on that property, including the main house, where your father and Monica currently reside. I staggered back, as if he'd been the one to strike me. Grandpa, no, you can't. That's their home. That's my father. It's a war. I can't. It is not a war, he said, his voice like iron. It's a correction, and it's already done. I was just waiting. I was waiting for the right moment. I was waiting for her to give me a reason so undeniable that no court, and no one in this family, could ever question my sanity in doing it. Tonight, he nodded back toward the house. That woman gave me my reason. That slap wasn't just her losing her temper, child. It was her signing her own eviction notice. I was reeling. My cheek throbbed, a physical anchor in a sea of new, terrifying information. I don't want to fight them. Grandpa, I just wanted them to stop. You can't be a shadow anymore, Carly, he said, his voice softening for the first time. They won't let you. That slap, as ugly as it was, it made you visible. You can never go back to being the helper in the corner. You're the one who got hit, and now, you're the one who holds all the cards. He put his heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. So, we're going to have one last family meeting, but not there. He jerked his chin at my father's house. Not on her territory, not at her table. He fixed me with that sharp, knowing gaze. You told me you built a place, the one from our old drawing, on the Miller land. You asked me to come see it. Is it ready? My mind flashed to Cedar Ridge, the soaring beams, the walls of glass, the massive stone fireplace, the maple tree standing strong in the yard, my fortress. Yes, I said. It's ready. The furniture was delivered last week. Good, he smiled, a grim, satisfied smile. Then that's where we'll do it. She had her party tonight. She showed the whole family who she really is. He squeezed my shoulder. Now it's your turn. Are you ready, Carly? Are you finally ready to show them who you really are? I thought of the house, my house, the one I had built to keep them out, and I realized, in that one cold, clear, painful moment, that I had built it all wrong. It wasn't a bunker to hide in. It was a fortress to rule from. I nodded, the single movement hurting my cheek, but I didn't care. I've built my porch. Grandpa, I said, my voice as steady as his. It's time to invite them up, or to finally, teach them to stay off it. The month that followed the party was silent. No one called me. My father didn't text an apology. Monica, I assumed, was busy spinning the story, painting me as the hysterical, violent one who had ruined her perfect night. I didn't care. I went back to Seattle. I let the red mark on my cheek fade. I let the lawyers in Wyoming finalize the paperwork for the trust Grandpa Arthur had instructed me to create. I let them all sit in the quiet, wondering what had happened. Then, exactly 1 month later, on a Friday afternoon, I sent a single text message to the Grant family group chat, the one Monica usually used to post pictures of Lily or send passive-aggressive reminders about holidays. My text was simple. Good afternoon. Grandpa Arthur would like to host a family dinner tomorrow at 6 p.m. at the new property I've built. For everyone who can attend, I will have a car pick you up from Dad's house at 5:30. The response was immediate, but not in the group chat. My father's name lit up my screen. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text from him. Carly, call me. This is a lot. Your mother is very upset. She thinks you're trying to show off. I didn't reply. Instead, I got a text from Grandpa Arthur, from his old flip phone. It was, as always, blunt and to the point. They will be there. She thinks I am dying, and this is the will reading. Letter. The car is a good touch. I hired a private car service out of Jackson Hole, not a limo, something more formidable, a black, executive model Escalade, the kind that transports politicians or billionaires, slick and silent and faintly menacing. The next day, I was at Cedar Ridge. I had been there since dawn. I had a catering team from a high-end Jackson restaurant setting up in the massive, state-of-the-art kitchen. I had the fireplace roaring, the flames reflecting off the 2-story-high glass walls. I was standing on my porch, a cup of hot coffee in my hands, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from the driver. "Package is secure. We are en route." I watched the empty winding road, and I waited. The Escalade was so quiet. I didn't hear it until I saw it. It emerged from the dense pine forest, its black paint gleaming. Looking sleek and alien in the rustic setting, it pulled into the wide circular driveway, and the engine cut, plunging the clearing back into silence. The back doors opened. Lily and her husband, looking bewildered, stepped out first. Lily craned her neck, her mouth open, staring up at the soaring roofline. "My God," her husband whispered, his eyes wide. Where are we? Is this a hotel? Is this some kind of resort?" My father got out next, looking small and rumpled. He just stared, his face pale, unable to process the sheer scale of the building. Finally, Monica emerged. She stepped out of the luxury vehicle as if she had been summoned. She was wearing her power outfit, a sharp blazer, expensive jeans, and heels, as if she was coming to a negotiation. She took one look at the house, her face tightening. This was not the little wood project she had been mocking. This was a statement. This was a fortress, and she was outside the walls. I stayed where I was, standing at the top of the wide stone steps, on the massive wraparound porch. I smiled. It wasn't the old, brittle smile of the helper. It was the smile of the owner. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice carrying easily in the crisp, cold air. "Welcome to my home." Lily's husband just kept muttering, "This is your house?" Monica regained her composure first. She smoothed the front of her blazer, narrowed her eyes, and marched up the steps, her heels clicking angrily on the stone. She was assessing, calculating, trying to find her angle. "Well, Carly," she said, forcing a high, brittle laugh, "this is quite the project. You work here, I assume? Who's the developer? Someone from Seattle?" I didn't answer. I just held the massive, 8-foot-tall timber and iron door open for her. "Please, come in out of the cold." She swept past me, expecting to find an employer she could charm or undermine. Instead, she found the great room. It was a cathedral of wood and light. The fireplace roared. The room smelled of cedar and wood smoke, and in the center, where the dining room was, there was no small, fussy table. There was a single, 30-foot-long, live-edge oak table, built from a single tree. It was set for 14 people. "Who?" my father stammered, walking in behind her. "Who else is coming?" "The family," I said simply. As if on cue, a second car, a large passenger van, pulled up. Out of it came my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, the same relatives who had been at the party, the ones who had watched me get hit, the ones who had fled. They walked in, their faces a mixture of awe, confusion, and fear. They were all here. This time, they couldn't just leave. "Carly, what is this?" Aunt Clara whispered, clutching her purse, her eyes darting around the room as if she'd just entered a different dimension. "It's just dinner, Aunt Clara," I said. "Please, find your seats. The cards are on the plates." And this was the first real blow. In Monica's house, there was always a hierarchy, the main table for her and my father, Lily, and the important guests, a kids' table, which I had been relegated to until I was old enough to just become staff, a side table on the patio for the less important, younger relatives. Here, there was only one table. I had set the places myself. There were no divisions. My cousins, the ones who usually ate on their laps, were seated right next to my father. Aunt Clara, who had pitied me, was seated next to Uncle Ron, who had looked disgusted. I had placed a brand-new, comfortable wooden high chair, matching the exact stain of the table, for Lily's baby. And at the head of the table, the seat that looked out through the towering wall of glass, the seat that overlooked the entire valley. I had placed a single, deep, cushioned leather armchair. The place card in front of it read, Grandpa Arthur. Monica, upon seeing that everyone was mixed together, that her entire, carefully crafted social structure had been demolished, went rigid. She found her name, placed pointedly in the middle of the table, sandwiched between two cousins she barely spoke to. As she sat, her eyes landed on the table in the entryway, the one she had ignored on her way in. On it, I had left a large, leather-bound portfolio. It was open. Inside were not just the blueprints of the house, but the first page of the deed, the legal documents for the land purchase, and at the bottom, in clear, unavoidable type, the name of the sole proprietor, C.A. Hale Holdings, LLC, Carly A. Grant, President. She stared at it. C.A. Hale, she whispered, realizing it was my mother's name. She looked at me, her face pale. You own this? I do, I said, taking my seat next to Grandpa Arthur's empty chair. But we're waiting for one more guest. Please, eat. The caterers will bring the first course. We ate in a state of surreal, tense silence, broken only by the clinking of silverware. The food was exquisite: braised bison, roasted root vegetables, artisan bread. It was a world away from the dry buffet trays at Monica's party. The relatives, caught between their fear of Monica and their awe of the house, finally broke. "Carly, honey," Aunt Clara said, her voice trembling slightly. How did you... your father said you were a project manager." I looked up from my plate, my gaze calm. And I told them. I didn't boast. I just stated the facts. I told them about Cascadia Tech. I told them about the garage in the industrial park. I told them about the research into high-tensile, sustainable, modular construction. I told them about the emergency housing contract after the Oregon floods. "The buyout," Uncle Ron said. His voice hushed. He was a banker. He understood. "The Veltman acquisition, that was your company? Skyline Haven?" "It was," I said. "I co-founded it. I sold my majority stake about a year ago." "The paper said," Ron whispered, doing the math in his head, "that it was north of 60 million. Dead silence. Lily's fork clattered onto her plate. My father just stared at his hands, his face ashen. And Monica looked like she had just swallowed poison. "You got lucky," she spat, her voice a low, strangled sound. "It was just good timing, a lucky break." No one looked at her. Every eye in the room was on me. And for the first time, they weren't looking at me with pity. They were looking at me with something I had never seen from them before. Awe, and a little bit of terror. Just as the catering staff began to clear the plates for dessert, the sound of an old truck rattling up the gravel road broke the silence. The headlights swept across the glass walls. The room held its breath. The front door opened, and Grandpa Arthur walked in. He was wearing his old, clean denim work jacket and his good boots. He looked every inch the farmer, but tonight he walked like a king. "Arthur," my father said, standing up, his voice cracking with a desperate, false heartiness. "You made it. Look at this. This place Carly's got." Grandpa Arthur ignored him. He walked straight to the head of the table, to the leather chair I had set for him. He placed his hand on the back of it, and he surveyed the room. He looked at every face, at Greg, at Lily, at Monica. And finally he looked at me. He gave me one slow, proud nod. He sat down. He didn't touch the dessert that was placed in front of him. He gently, deliberately, tapped the side of his water glass with his spoon. Ting, ting, ting. The room, which had already been silent, became profoundly still. "Thank you all for coming," Grandpa Arthur said. His voice was not loud, but it filled the cavernous room, echoing off the high wooden beams. It was the voice of a man who owned the land he stood on. "I asked Carly to bring you here," he continued, "because this
This is a special place. This is a place that was built, not just bought. It was built with hands and brains and sacrifice. He looked right at me. He then turned his gaze to my father and Monica. This is more than a family meal. I'm an old man, and it's time for me to make my final intentions, my decisions, clear about the land, about the farm. My father sat down, his knees buckling. Monica, who had been pale, suddenly had a bright, feverish flush on her cheeks. She and Greg locked eyes. This was it. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The inheritance. The moment they would finally be rewarded for putting up with the old man, for taking care of the farm they had let fall into disrepair. They had always assumed, with a deep, unshakable arrogance, that it was all coming to them, that Lily, their princess, would be the one to inherit the glory. The air in the room was so tight, I felt like I couldn't breathe. My heart was a hammer against my ribs. But I wasn't at the side table. I wasn't in the kitchen. I was sitting at the head of the table, next to the man who was running the meeting. And my right hand was in my pocket, my fingers wrapped tightly around the small, cold metal USB drive, the one that held the sound of a slap. I'd like to ask everyone to join me on the porch, Grandpa Arthur said, his voice calm and authoritative. He pushed back his heavy leather chair. A confused, nervous murmur went through the room. My father, Greg, looked at Monica, his face a mask of pale anxiety. Monica, however, seemed to regain her footing. This was it, the will. She stood up, smoothing her blazer, a thin, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She thought she was about to be crowned. One by one, the family filed out of the great room and onto the massive, wraparound porch. The sun was setting, casting the entire valley below in a deep, bleeding light of orange and purple. The air was cold, and the catering staff, at my earlier instruction, was handing out thick wool blankets. Against the far wall of the porch, overlooking the most dramatic part of the valley, I had asked the AV team from Seattle to install a simple 80-inch outdoor television screen. It was dark, a black, reflective void against the rough log wall. Everyone gathered, huddling in their blankets, their breath pluming in the cold air. They formed a nervous semicircle around Grandpa Arthur. He stood in the center, his back to the valley, the colors of the sunset framing him like a portrait. Before I talk about the future, he began, his voice carrying in the twilight, I think it's important that we all look back, clearly, at the past. I think it's time we all looked at how we've really been treating each other. Monica's thin smile faltered. Arthur, what is this? This is hardly the time for old home movies. Just tell us what your decision is. I will. Monica, he said, his voice level. As soon as we're all on the same page about the truth. He looked at me. Carly, if you would. My heart was a fist in my chest. I walked past the family, past my father, who wouldn't meet my eyes, past Monica, who watched me with narrowed, hateful suspicion. What is she doing? Monica demanded, looking at my father. Greg, what is this? I don't know, my father stammered. I reached the screen. From my pocket, I took the small, cold, silver USB drive. I inserted it into the weatherproof slot on the side of the monitor. The screen flickered to life. Father, what is this nonsense? Monica said, her voice sharp with annoyance. Are you trying to embarrass us? And then, the video started. The sound, piped through the high-end outdoor speakers, was shockingly clear. The first image was the chaotic, overlit backyard of my father's house. The vinyl banner screaming, Happy 50th, Monica, was hideously clear. And then, there was her voice, loud and slurred with champagne, carrying over the party chatter. You'd think there'd be a little gratitude, but no, some kids, they just love to play the victim. I heard Aunt Clara let out a small, strangled gasp. She was seeing herself, on screen, standing right next to Monica, nodding along politely. The scene shifted. It was me, talking to Uncle Ron, and then there was Monica, striding over,
her face a mask of condescending charm. "She's a worker," her voice echoed across the porch, sharp and dismissive. "Not like our Lily. Now she's the artist." Uncle Ron, standing beside me on the porch, winced as if he'd been struck. And then came the confrontation. The camera was steady, capturing the whole thing from behind the maple tree. It was a perfect, damning, unobstructed view. The porch was utterly silent. No one moved. They were all frozen, forced to watch the truth they had either ignored or fled from. They heard my voice, clear and cold. "It was favoritism. You didn't raise me. You just found a clever way to get free labor." They saw Monica's face contort. They saw her lunge. They saw my father's weak, useless attempt to step between us. They saw her grab my arm. They saw her hand swing. And then, from the speakers, the sound, the hideous, sharp, violent crack of her hand connecting with my face. It was so loud. In the cold, still mountain air, it sounded like a gunshot. Lily, standing on the porch, let out a terrified sob and buried her face in her husband's chest, her own baby mercifully inside with the staff. Aunt Clara put her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Uncle Ron just stared at the screen, his face a mask of pure, cold disgust. My father made a small, choking sound, as if he couldn't breathe. But the video wasn't over. On screen, they watched me scream, that raw, primal sound of 20 years of pain, and then they watched my head turn. They watched my gaze lock onto the camera. And then the camera's view shifted. It panned slowly, deliberately, to the right, showing the dark trunk of the maple tree, and then, for a final, brutal second, it flipped around. The last image on the screen, before it went black, was the face of Grandpa Arthur. He was grim, steady, and holding the phone, his eyes looking directly into the lens, a complete and unimpeachable witness. The screen went dark. The silence that followed was heavier and more profound than any I had ever experienced. It was the silence of judgment, the silence of an entire family having no excuses left. Monica was sheet white. She was trembling, her hands clenched at her sides. She started, her voice a hoarse, rattling whisper. I was drunk. She provoked me. She was lying, trying to steal my night. I raised that girl. For 20 years. I gave her a home." "You gave her a chore list." Grandpa Arthur's voice boomed, cutting through her excuses like an axe through deadwood. "You didn't raise her. You used her. You don't get to call it love when you trade affection for the right to abuse. You don't get to call it sacrifice when you use one child to polish the crown of another." He reached into the breast pocket of his jacket and pulled out a long, folded set of legal documents. "I made this decision 2 years ago," he said, his voice flat and final. "The day I realized who the real builder in this family was. But I waited. I waited for a day when my mind could not be questioned. I waited for a day when the reason for my decision was so clear, so visible, that not a single person in this town or in this family could ever call it a mistake." He looked at Monica, his eyes void of all pity. "Tonight, you, your friends, and half this family watched my granddaughter be physically assaulted by you. You did that, and in doing so, you gave me my reason. You cemented my decision. You proved my case." He unfolded the document. "This is my last will and testament, filed, signed, and legally binding." Monica and Greg both leaned forward, a desperate, hungry look on their faces. "I, Arthur Hale," he read, his voice resonanting off the timber and glass, "being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath the entirety of my estate, including the Hale family farm, all 500 acres of adjoining land, all properties, structures, and equipment thereon, and my controlling shares in the Hale Agricultural Co-op, to my granddaughter, Carly Ann Grant." He paused, and then added, "This house, Cedar Ridge Estate, and the land it is on, is, of course, already hers. My father let out a sound, a high, thin whine, like a dog being kicked. I don't, I get nothing? I'm your son. I get nothing? I didn't say that, Greg, Grandpa Arthur said, his voice softening, but only slightly. I've left you a generous annuity from the co-op dividends, enough for you to live on, comfortably, for the rest of your life. You will be taken care of. He took a step toward his son. But you will not have the land. You will not have control. You had your chance to be the steward of this family, Greg, and you stood by, for 20 years, and you watched. You watched her be erased. You watched her be used. And last month, you watched her be hit. And you did nothing. You don't get to control the land you refuse to protect. My father crumpled. He literally sank into one of the outdoor chairs, his head in his hands, and he began to sob. Thin, reedy, pathetic sounds. But Monica didn't cry. She shook, her face, which had been pale, turned a deep, blotchy, furious red. This wasn't grief, it was rage. It was the complete, total, agonizing loss of control. The dynasty she had built, the future she had stolen for her own daughter, had just been vaporized. She turned to me. Her eyes were black with a venom so pure it was almost beautiful. Are you satisfied? She spat, her voice a low, vicious hiss. Is this what you wanted? You built all this. You did all this. Just to take everything from us? I looked at her. I looked at this woman who had made my childhood a cold, gray, lonely prison. I looked at her, and I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, not even pity. No, Monica, I said, and my voice was finally my own. I'm not satisfied. I'm just relieved. I'm relieved, because from this moment on, I never have to ask your permission to sit at the table again. I'm relieved because this is the last time you will ever speak to me, or about me, in that tone. I turned from her and looked at the rest of them. My family, all of them, stunned, silent, watching me. This is how it is going to be, I said, and the authority in my own voice was new to me. It felt right. This land, my grandfather's land, and my land, is now one. I am in charge of it, and things are going to change. I looked at my father, still weeping in the chair. If you still see this as your home, if any of you, I looked at Lily, at my cousins, still see this as your family, I will find a way to make a place for you. We will find a way forward. My gaze snapped back to Monica. But I will not tolerate another slap, not with a hand, and not with words. This family, from this day on, will be a place of respect. You will respect me. You will respect my grandfather. And you will respect everyone at this table, or you will not have a place at it. There are no more helpers. There are no more princesses. There is only us, and we will be better, or you will leave. No one spoke. The verdict was delivered. Grandpa Arthur stepped forward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy, old-fashioned key ring. On it was the thick, iron key to the old farmhouse, the key to the barns, the key to the workshop. He walked over to my workbench in the great room, picked up the brand-new, sleek electronic key fob for Cedar Ridge, and walked back. He held them both out to me, a jangle of old iron and new plastic. He pressed the keys into my palm, and his calloused, warm hand closed over mine. It was the same way he'd handed me my first wrench, all those years ago in the barn. It's all yours, Carly, he whispered, for my ears only. Build something strong. The family slowly, silently, began to break apart. They drifted, one by one, like ghosts, back to the van that was waiting to take them home. My father had to be helped by Uncle Ron. Monica walked alone, ramrod straight, her head high, defeated but defiant to the last. I was left standing on the porch, the keys heavy in my hand. The last light of the sun was gone, and the valley was plunged into a deep, velvety darkness, pricked with the first stars. Grandpa Arthur came and stood beside me. We looked out at the vast, dark, silent land, my land. Behind us, the warm light of my house, the house I built, spilled out onto the porch. The new, strong maple tree stood dark against the sky. "The day you screamed," Grandpa Arthur said quietly, not looking at me, just looking at the valley. "The day you screamed under that old maple tree, I knew it was finally time." He turned and smiled at me, a real smile, full of pride and relief. "Today," he said, "you don't have to scream anymore, child. You just have to open the door." I turned, and for the first time, I faced all of you. If you were ever pushed away from the table in your own home, if you were ever made to feel small in the one place you should have been safe, what would you choose? A. Walk away quietly and let them have it. Or B. Build a whole new porch, and only open the door for those who truly, truly deserve a seat? Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you're listening from, and share your thoughts on what happened. Your support means everything. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you want to help this story reach even more people who need to hear it, please hit that hype button.